All right, so after 36 days of the unknown, it is official. The unanimous vote came down today, and we are going to return to Big Ten football at the end of October. So it's coming back. So I figured we'd talk about it. The Big Ten will return to football at the end of October. That is confirmed now. It was a unanimous decision. All the schools have voted to play, all 14 institutions that belong to the conference. So nobody will be left out, and we will have a somewhat full season, if you will. I believe the original schedule before they decided their initial postponement was 10 games, but now we're going to go down to an 8-game schedule, and that's going to begin on October 23rd slash the 24th, and we're going to see all the Big Ten teams participate. So before we get into what's going to happen in the coming weeks, let's talk about what led up to this point. So the original I believe the original reason that they decided to postpone the season and try for a spring season was just simple fear of the unknown. And a lot of it has to do with myocarditis being present in athletes that have tested positive for COVID 19, and also the unknown long term effects when it comes to heart conditions that are exacerbated by COVID 19 as is. And one of the more prominent cases that I can think of in professional sports was Eduardo Rodriguez, one of the starting pitchers for the Boston Red Sox, who was not able to play this year due to having myocarditis after a positive COVID 19 test. So those effects forced him to miss this season, albeit it was just a 60-game season, but even still. And there's still a lot of unknown factors about how this is going to affect people going forward. You know, we're only 7 months in of a pandemic that we don't have a lot of answers for long term. So it remains to be seen how that is going to go. And I think when we talk about some of the stuff here on the board, we're going to realize that we're headed in the right direction. So that's another point that I wanted to make. Of all of the scrutiny and backlash and everything that the Big Ten has received for the original decision to postpone the season, and now the criticism that they're going to receive for starting it back up 36 days later, is that at least, despite not handling it properly with the media and being forthright, at least they handled this in the proper way in terms of making sure that their student athletes are taken care of, because they weren't ready to, green light a season without the rapid same day testing being available. And that is the catalyst to what led to this decision. So they felt comfortable listening to the doctors, the scientists, in that most recent meeting this past weekend, and that is what is going to lead them forward. And I believe it was the Northwestern athletic director or president who said, I forget which one it was, but it was the guy from Northwestern who said this wasn't based on money, this wasn't based on politics, this wasn't based on being able to say, hey, we can play football. It was based on the health and safety of the student athletes. And given the track record that I've seen, having paid attention to this story for several months, with the studies coming out from Penn State, with other conferences calling the Big Ten, being like, hey, what have you learned? Why are you making the decisions that you have? I'm confident that at least at this juncture, they're staying true to that statement. So, how is this going to work? As we've already mentioned, they'll have an 8-game schedule. They'll resume play on October 23rd slash the 24th. We're going to do a +1 model for the season for all teams, which I think is interesting. This could be the creation of something either magnificent or a dud, but right now I'm leaning towards magnificent. So the +1 model is basically we're going to have the 8-game season, and then the top 2 teams at the end will play each other for the Big Ten championship. And then what they're doing is sort of creating their own in-conference bowl season, if you will, by having the second place teams duke it out in a +1, third place teams will duke it out in a +1, all the way down to the teams that are dead last in the division. So interestingly enough, they've subsequently created the sort of toilet bowl to decide who's going to be the worst team in the league, which is ever going to be the team that loses, that 7 seed versus the 7 seed. So I find this extremely interesting. Hopefully we're not down there, or hopefully none of your schools are down there, but at the same time, this could be fun. This could be really interesting. What this does do, however, is leaves very little room for error. So in the era of COVID-19, we've already seen, I believe we're up to 11 FBS games have been postponed. One of the more recent notable ones would be Virginia versus Virginia Tech because of an outbreak. So we've had a lot of postponements leading up to this point so far, and I would expect more. Same thing in baseball. There was a lot of postponements. We've had several teams have outbreaks, the Marlins being probably the most notable one, if you will. But in other sports like baseball and even in professional sports, like basketball and football, even though basketball is sort of not really part of this because they are in a bubble and the bubble has proven to work. You can sort of fang jangle the schedule and leave open spots. In baseball, you can play double headers, things like that. With this 8-game schedule, 8 straight weeks, with only, I believe it's a week or two break before the playoffs, if you will, is going to make it a lot harder for them to sort of have an outbreak and then try to figure out what to do. Because if they want, which I believe they do, if they want to be part of the CFP college football playoffs selection process, they're going to need to finish this before that happens. And this is keeping alive the championship dreams of one Ohio State. So I hope that that's incentive for nobody to really screw this up. So don't go out and have parties, if you will. So there's little room for error because I don't see how you can reschedule games in this tight of a window. And they're not going to be starting till the end of October. And they're going to play through all of November and what have you. So if something goes wrong, I don't know how the reaction or what they're going to be able to do to pull this off. I haven't looked that far into it yet. Looking over to this side of the board, some of the questions that came up today and were actually answered pretty quickly was that can players who have opted out come back? And the answer is yes, according to the legal analysis by Sports Illustrated, as if they haven't signed on with an agent and done a few other things to make themselves draft declared official, if you will, they can absolutely rescind that opt-out and come back. And we've seen a couple of players do it already. Pat Fryermuth announced today that he'll be returning to Penn State, and he's one of the tight ends that could be seen getting drafted in the first round this year. Over at Ohio State earlier today, before I started recording, it was mentioned that they've heard reporters that heard rumblings that Ryan Day was going to reach out to Wyatt Davis and Shaun Wade. And right before I hit record, it sounds like those two players are probably coming back. Also, we have the positive test protocol, which I found very interesting. This is stringent, and this is one of those other pieces of evidence that I find that it means that the Big Ten is taking this seriously, because the time frame to return to play after a positive test for COVID in the NCAA, set by the NCAA right now, is 14 days. They went a step further and made it 21. So after a positive test, they will need to have no positive test for the next 21 days. They will also be subjugated to quite a full comprehensive regime of cardiac testing. We're going to have ECGs, cardiac MRIs, echocardiograms, everything between the past 36 to 40 days and right now, including this positive test protocol, tells me that they are very concerned about what this can do to student athletes in terms of myocarditis and heart problems going forward. So they are, hopefully this works, and this is a method that other conferences can adopt. Speaking of other conferences, kind of not very happy with the way that some other schools are handling this. Oklahoma says it's no longer going to share its COVID-19 testing data or information because they want a quote-unquote competitive advantage, which is all kinds of messed up. LSU's head coach said that he believes, I don't know if he was just, just BSing or whatever, but he says he believes that all of their players probably have had it, and he hopes that they don't get it again, which is kind of reckless in my opinion. And then the Pac-12 itself has just decided that as of right now, it's not returning, so we won't have the Pac-12 at least for the foreseeable future. So that is basically the gist of today's decision and announcement. So looking forward to Minnesota football. I don't think Rashad Bateman is going to return. I think he's probably going to stay declared for the draft because he is a pretty solid lock for a first overall pick. This wide receiver class is going to be good. Other players to look out for too would be like Micah Parsons, Rondale Moore. I believe that there's some other ones that I'm forgetting that are pretty prominent, but for right now, that's all I can recall. So that is a look at the Big Ten going forward. So what this means also is, at least for me and my channel, that we get to do more comprehensive looks at prospects going forward, because we're going to get to see the full slate of Big Ten teams actually play games this year. So there will be 2020 footage for players heading into the draft, and that's exciting at least. So hopefully this goes well. Hopefully everything works out smoothly. That's our look at the Big Ten from today's announcement. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.